The U.S. Surgeon General speaking to senators this week about what he has called a mental health crisis for America's youth. Dr. Vivek Murthy's appearance on Capitol Hill comes after a December advisory calling attention to this issue. Both Democrat and Republican senators on the Finance Committee did signal support for doing something legislatively, though the Surgeon General says this isn't really just a matter for Congress.
You can't necessarily legislate your way out of stigma. That's a cultural change we all have to play a role in. But where Congress can make a big difference is in focusing on expanding access to treatment, making sure that we are integrating primary care with mental health services, that we're expanding our pipeline for mental health professionals, and that we're doing that in a diverse way.
He says we have not just a medical obligation to address the issue, but a moral one as well. Some of the data released in that Surgeon General report from December are alarming. In early 2021, emergency department visits in the U.S. for suspected suicide attempts were 51% higher for adolescent girls and 4% higher for adolescent boys compared to the same time period in early 2019. And about 140,000 children and adolescents in the U.S. lost a parent or caregiver during the first 15 months of the pandemic. And globally, the report found symptoms of depression and anxiety have doubled. Mari Broom joins us now. She's a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in adolescent and young adult mental health. Thank you so much for your time today, Mari. How much of a crisis was this before the pandemic, and in what way specifically is COVID making things worse?
So I definitely think it was a very big crisis prior to the pandemic itself. When you think about teens and kids these days and what they deal with, social media, social pressures, sexuality, gender injustices, school shootings that were happening prior to the pandemic, and then the pandemic itself, interestingly enough, in my practice, I kind of initially saw a decline. A lot of the clients I actually see have social anxiety and a lot of social pressures. So for them, it was a little bit of a bubble initially. They didn't have to go out. There weren't expectations. And then as time continued and there were so many unknowns about what this was going to look like, then the anxiety started to spike up again. And I would say even more recently, it's been more of an issue. The anxiety has crept back in. Kids are having to get back to normal or whatever that is. And I think a lot of us don't even know what that is at this point. They have to have these academic pressures once again and back in school, and where the education system definitely, I feel, suffered. Not just the students, but the teachers struggled with that. Parents struggled with that. So that now they're back into this kind of weird place of, okay, we have to try to get back to normal. I think the other problem that I saw amongst teens and even adults is social media during the pandemic. And unfortunately, as we both know, it was very much politicized. And no matter what side of the coin you're on, people really were sharing a lot of their opinions and a lot of their beliefs. And there was a lot of shame and guilt on both ends, and from some of their friends and even family members. So they leave their homes kind of going back into this real world situation, not really knowing their friends anymore. So it's an interesting kind of trend that I saw. Again, initially, a lot of mental health challenges and issues, to some kind of relief in a way, because not a lot of expectation, to, again, a spike coming out of it.
Yeah, it seems like it definitely can be a lot, especially for younger people. I want to get your thoughts on something a journalist said back in December after the Surgeon General released a report we mentioned earlier. Referring to the mental health crisis, CBS News chief legal correspondent said on Face the Nation, quote, "If our policies don't reflect a more measured and reasonable approach for our children, they will be paying for our generation's decisions the rest of their lives." And that, to me, is the greatest underreported story of the past year. Do you see it this way, too? Because of our focus on things like caseloads and deaths from COVID, which are definitely noteworthy, do we lose sight of the long-term mental health implications for young people?
Absolutely. I actually couldn't agree more. And I think it's unfortunate. The reality is I think the story of COVID in and of itself really clouded a lot of that. While I was seeing clients who actually were in the mental health field themselves, access to care was really a problem. Trying to get people into treatment, and obviously everything had to be virtual. So I do think that this is going to have really long-term effects. I think that it is already having that. Unfortunately, access to care has always been an issue, whether it's cost, just lack of education on where to find people, too long of wait lists, not enough beds. This is obviously a huge issue, and I think that there are some potential ways. I'm sure everybody has similar answers. I'm not sure how to make it happen, but whether it be early prevention, kind of helping with funding and giving schools enough time to educate kids and families about mental health. I think a lot of time is taken away really focusing on academics when there's so much more, especially when that's where kids spend most of their time, to be able to educate them and kind of decrease that stigma.
Yeah, and it's so important to be able to have a sounding board for anyone who may be struggling and to get people the help they need if they're dealing with, because COVID is just such a heavy burden sometimes. Mari Broom, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we want to give you the free resources available if you or someone you know is struggling. The numbers are on your screen now. You can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HOME to the crisis text line at 741-741.